So tonight we're talking at your core. So what we're going to be going through tonight, we're going to talk about the definition of your core. We're going to go over why it's important. We're going to go through movement patterns. And this is probably something you may not have seen before. We're going to talk about exercises for the different movement patterns. And I'm going to talk about how to progress some of the exercises we've already discussed. Then we're going to talk about injury prevention and a little bit more specific going through the mechanics of back injuries. So the actual definition of core is the central or most important part of something. I kind of liked that because you hear a lot about your core muscles, but a lot of people don't understand how important they are. So you have basically your abs, what most people think of as their six-pack. That's only a small part of your core. When we talk about core, we mean all the way around. So this just kind of talks about the actual muscles that are involved, but I also like good visuals. So when we talk core, this is what we're actually talking about. And you notice your glutes are part of it and your hip flexors are actually part of your core. So one of the big things that we state is if your glutes are weak, your lower back is weak. So all of that ties in together. So when we say core, it basically starts at the top of your rib cage and literally goes all the way down to your hip flexors. And most people focus on basically their stomach, what's in front, but what's on the sides and the back is the most important part. So I think I've mentioned that last year, the Army and the Navy both got rid of sit-ups for their PT test. Now, one of the big things I always joke around with a lot of the troops about is sit-ups are a garbage exercise. They always have been. So if sit-ups are about testing abdominal strength, why do we exempt people with lower back injuries from the sit-up test? And that's because your abs are only 40% of your propulsion for sit-ups. Your lower back is another 40%. Your obliques, which are on the sides, are 10% each. So everything works together. Now, your core actually does a number of jobs. One of the most important, stabilizes your hips and spine. It provides balance when you stand on one foot. So when you lift up one foot, it's not just that glute that has to tighten up to stabilize your pelvis. Your core, your obliques, your abs and lower back on the opposite side also tighten up to stabilize you. This connects your upper body with your lower body. So your core is actually meant to be very strong and stable, but only somewhat mobile. And I'll really go into that later. Everybody thinks your lower back is meant to be super mobile. It's not. And a lot of people really focus on really stretching their lower back. It's not meant to be really flexible. And I'll explain how that works. I've got a great picture that shows how this actually sums things up. So your core, when we talk about movement patterns, we use what's called a FIRE protocol, military and acronyms. So there's 4 basic movement patterns for your core. The first one is flexion, meaning sitting up. Now, you do this all the time. You do a flexion pattern when you get out of bed, when you get out of a chair, when you get up from laying down in any fashion. So you use that one a lot. The problem is because it's in front of you and what you see in the mirror, most people focus just on flexion, which means you've missed a huge part of what your core is meant to do. So isometric, and we're going to talk about these more in depth. Isometric basically means tightening everything up or stabilizing without movement of the spine. You have rotation, and then you have extension. So Dave sent out a thing to me earlier today, and it talked about TRICARE is actually beginning of January. If you have chronic back pain, TRICARE is actually authorizing 3 physical therapy visits covered under insurance.
Oh.
Now, one of the issues there, though, is first of all, they're going to try to get you out of pain. That's the most important thing. Pain is not progress. We cannot work if you're in pain. Where they're going to focus the most is on extensions. This is going to be the first place that they try to strengthen you. Not in flexion, not in rotation, extensions. So that workout program that we started with, there is a very specific reason for those exercises. Bridges are a physical therapy exercise. So that's one of the reasons why I gave you bridges as one of the starting exercises for extensions. You'll notice in that program, I only put 3 core exercises. 2 were extensions, 1 was isometric. So we started with extensions to work your lower back and glutes mostly. And then we went to isometric to work on stabilizing your back and your core. Those are the first 2 areas we work on. Rotation would be next. Flexion is the last thing we have you do if you've had a back injury. You already do it. There's no reason to load it even more. So modifications can be done to all these, but if you have an injury, extensions are the most important exercise or most important movement pattern out of everything here. So flexion, like I said, it's a sit-up, it's a crunch. And this is where we used to really focus everything. The problem is it's the last place you should be focusing on. So people do it mostly for the aesthetic part or to help flatten their stomach. And that can be fine as long as you're doing them correctly. So when we teach people to do flexion, in the top of those 2 visuals, before the person actually starts to curl up, you actually suck the belly button into the spine first. So you have what's called transverse abdominis. It basically acts like a belt that goes around your lower back and abs. If you've seen bodybuilders with a 6-pack, but it's really distended and pushed out, that's because when they do sit-ups, they don't suck their belly button in. They actually push out on it when they're coming up. It actually stretches out those muscles in the transverse abdominis. It does not flatten out your stomach. It actually forces your stomach to stick out because that belt that's meant to cinch around you has become weak. So in these, you actually suck the belly button in first, then try to curl up or sit up. That way you're using rectus abdominis and transverse abdominis. That is all of the abdomen musculature, and you're going to get the most out of it. Now, if that's already easy for you, you can do little things. Pick your feet up off the ground. Bring your one elbow to opposite knee. We call those bicycles. Bring both elbows to both knees at the same time. We call those double crunches. Those are all ways to progress flexion, make it a little more challenging. One caveat here, though. Whenever you make this more challenging, you're loading your lower back more also. So if your lower back is the weakest part, you don't try adding more load to your abs because it's going to hurt your lower back. That's why we always start with extension. This is the last place we go. Now, one of the other exercises we used was a plank. There's a reason why you hear so much about planks anymore. This is a stabilization. It's a way to stabilize your core, your lower back, your abs, your obliques. We also call this an anti-rotation exercise, meaning this builds strength to prevent you from rotating or being pulled out of shape, which could cause an injury. So with a plank, these are great exercises. Fitness standards, you should be able to hold a plank on the floor like this for 2 minutes all the way up to the age of 65. After 65, they only give you about 10 seconds per decade off the 2-minute mark. So you should be able to hold a plank. The Navy is doing planks, and you need to be able to hold it for 3.5 minutes. Yes, and most of our people cannot even make the 2-minute mark of 65-year-olds, so they're going to be in trouble. So ways to change this: hold it for a longer amount of time. I'll have people alternate lifting one arm or one leg. So now you only have 3 points of contact instead of 4. Or a side plank is even more advanced. The only caveat to a side plank is it's going to put a lot more load on your shoulders. If you have one bad shoulder, I would not recommend a side plank. You will probably really feel it in that one shoulder. So this is a great way to do it. If your shoulders are weaker, lift a leg. Don't worry about lifting an arm. And if you lift a leg, it means your hips and glutes are going to work harder. If you lift an arm, your upper abs are going to work harder and upper back. So you can really kind of adjust this based on your needs or goals. Now, rotation. This is very important for your abs. However, it's a little contentious as far as risk for injury. So an even easier version of this is sitting where you are now, literally rotating head and shoulders one side to the other side. That's actually going to be a rotation that's going to work your abs a little bit. So we're always rotating, strengthening the body, slow, short range of motion initially. We want to be able to work on building up strength for rotation. And then how can we change this one up? Pick the feet off the ground, hold them up while you do it. It's going to keep the abs loaded and force you to rotate. Put a small weight in your hands, hold it at chest level. Force your body to move a little bit more weight. Doesn't have to be anything big, but start light and easy. Now, the single most important exercises are going to be extensions. So the top one with the gentleman in red, those are bridges. If you come into physical therapy, that is a staple of physical therapy. The other one is the lady that's on hands and knees first. We call these quadrupeds. This is also a physical therapy staple that we use. Supermans are a little bit more advanced, but that's also a great one. It's working your lower back, your hips and glutes. So that extension piece is huge. This really works on stabilizing your lower back. So hips and glutes, lower back. One of the big things that we talk about as people age, they tend to lose their butt, meaning their butt flattens out. Now, most people think, oh, hey, that's great. No, it's not. That is part of your core. That is part of your stabilization and strength of your lower back. So your glutes, your butt, actually helps stabilize your lower back and lower spine. If your glutes are weak, your lower back is weak. So that's why we actually I load people up doing 2 to 3 times as many extensions as anything else. It really helps offset all the sitting and everything else that we do. This will strengthen your body. And that's why we started with these. This is where physical therapy will always start. So if we can get you into extension without pain, we can get your back stronger. And then how do we change these up? For bridges, I start people by something really simple, picking the toes up, just having your heels on the ground when you do them. You will feel a difference. You may think it's funny, but trust me, as soon as you try it, you will be very surprised. It puts a lot more of your body weight load on your hamstrings, hips, and glutes and lower back all of a sudden. I'll have people add a weight, put a weight right on top of your belly button. Start with something small, 3, 5, 8 pounds, or lift one leg. If you can do this while lifting one leg, number one, it's going to be a lot more challenging, but now you're really working on each side independently. That hip and glute, that lower back, that hamstring, you're separating out the two sides. You're strengthening each side independently. The other part to that will be, I'll guarantee you're going to find your weakness real fast. A lot of people don't realize they have one side weaker than the other. Separate out the sides. Lifting one leg is going to force one side to work. The other side cannot help. You will see if you have a muscle imbalance, and especially if you've had a prior injury, you will really notice the difference with that one. But start with 2 legs first, build up. I don't usually have people go to one leg until they've all done this with weight first and have gotten better at it. Now, injury prevention. One of the big things, lower back injuries account for 40% of our injuries. That is the predominant injury. And I have some units that have a 60% back injury rate, meaning, sadly enough, they kind of consider it a rite of passage. If you're in that unit, you're going to get hurt. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when and how bad. And one of the things we always tell people, once you've had a lower back injury, you will always have a lower back problem. It's a question of how well you maintain your core and lower back strength from here. So the little piece on the lower right-hand side, the reason I wanted to show this to you, that disc in the middle, if you look, when somebody bends forward, the movement of that disc is going towards the back. So the worst possible thing you can do is bend forward and then twist at the same time. You've heard of people go out in the morning, bend over to pick up the newspaper, throw out their back. It wasn't the weight of the newspaper. It was that movement pattern. When you bend forward, you're trying to push the inside of those discs towards your, basically towards your backside. When you bend and then twist, you're now pushing all of that towards one single point on one corner, either back left or back right, depending upon which way you've twisted. So now you're putting a lot of force trying to push that disc out. And that's where people get hurt. Everybody thinks that inside our body there's open space. No, there's not. Our body is a literally zero tolerances. What that means is right up against your vertebra are your nerves. And above those nerves, now you've got your muscle and fascia. So if that disc pushes out a little bit, it pushes on a nerve, almost guaranteed. When we measure back injury, we measure it in millimeters. If we talk 5, 6 millimeters, that's a major back injury. That's big, because that is how much pressure and load is pushing on those nerves now. There's no empty space. So when those things are pushing, and once you tear one of those discs and herniate a little bit of the fluid, it does not fully repair and heal itself. You will always have a weak spot there. One of the things we state is number one predictor of an injury is a prior injury. Because you've got a weak spot there, certain movement patterns, bend and a twist to the left, will do it every time, because that spot will never fully heal. So bend, don't bend and twist. Now, this actually shows herniated discs, bulge discs, ruptured discs, slip discs. It's all the same thing. You see how a little bit of that disc is pushing out and pinching on that nerve. One of the big things a lot of people don't realize is your body will eventually reabsorb that material. So it may take a couple months, but your body will literally reabsorb that material. When they go in and do surgery, a lot of times all they do is go in and cut off that little protruding piece. That's it. That takes the pressure off the nerve. You don't have pain anymore, but you still have that weak spot on that vertebra. So now the only thing that stabilizes that spine and keeps everything lined up are the muscles around it. That's why that lower back and core strength is so important. I don't care about a six-pack. I care about, do you have the lower back strength to prevent injuries like that? And that's what all the exercises are about, is literally preventing those types of injuries. So I've got one of my guys in public health. He actually just PCS'd to Florida. He's a big power lifter. He herniated 2 discs, and it was major herniations. He was in a wheelchair for a little over 2 weeks. We got him out of the wheelchair and got him back lifting again. Now he's 27, 28. So yeah, he's a youngin'. He recovers quickly. Now, within a year, he was back to lifting heavy. What do I mean when I say heavy? He did a 675-pound deadlift on his 1-year anniversary from his injury. So a little over 3 times his body weight. It can be done, but those exercises that I just showed you, I had him doing multiple variations of each. We call a lot of that accessory work. He was doing bridges, single leg bridges, planks, side planks, quadrupeds. I had him doing a ton of that to get his back strong enough to get him back to lifting again. So you can get back to lifting and get back basically to life, but you have to make sure you take care of the injury correctly. And we're going to talk about some of the things. How do you take care of back injuries? So this is what I was talking about as far as our body. If you notice the circle where it says where the lower back is, that's meant to be very stable. Your hips are meant to be mobile. Your knees are meant to be stable. Your ankles are meant to be mobile. Now, going up from your lower back, what we call your mid-thoracic, that is meant to be really mobile. Your neck is meant to be stable. So everybody that cranks on their lower back really twists and turns it. No, your body is not meant to twist and turn on that lower back that much. Your mid back, yes. So when I talk to the pilots, when they're in the cockpit, and obviously they don't have rear view mirrors like we do in the cars, When they have to turn and look and see if something's coming up behind them, well, their hips and butt are still staying in that seat. So it's not their lower back that's turning. It's between their shoulders and their lower back that's turning the most. That is your mid-thoracic spine. That is meant to be very mobile. And even the vertebra, the actual bone structures are different. Thoracic vertebra versus lumbar vertebra. So we actually name them different because the actual structures are different. So your lower back and your core is meant to be very stable and strong. Yes, you need some mobility, but strength is the key issue there, not flexibility. So if you have a back injury, ice. Everybody thinks the old ice for a day or two, then switch to heat. No, ice. Ice is your friend if you have a back injury. Why? A lot of that pain that you're going to feel is from inflammation of the nerves. If the nerves are irritated along your spine, that's where you're going to get pain. Icing that helps remove that inflammation. My actual recommendation to people is if you have a back injury, ice right before you go to bed for 30 minutes. If you cool that area off, number one, you're going to sleep better, which means you're going to recover better and faster. It's also going to allow you to get to sleep better. A lot of people that have back injuries have trouble getting to sleep because their back is irritated. Icing it before you go to bed. If the muscles surrounding your back, a lot of times they will tighten up, and we call that guarding. The reason why they tighten up so much is to prevent you from hurting yourself again. Yes, you can heat those. So heat for muscles, but along the joints, ice, and especially nerves, it's always ice. You don't want to heat across a nerve because that actually pulls more fluid into the area and can put more pressure on the nerves, which means more pain and discomfort. So gently stretching. We want those guarding muscles to relax and release a little bit. Most of the time, 2 or 3 days post-injury, the reason why people walk around so stiff, it's because everything is tightened up because they're guarding. It's not because of that initial injury. Everything is tightened up. We need to stretch that out a little bit. Foam rolling is great. The key thing is never stretch to the point of pain. You want to get out of pain first before you start any of the strength training exercises. So the 2 to 3 visits for physical therapy, there's a reason why they do ice packs and ice therapy. It's to reduce the inflammation to get you out of pain. And the goal initially for physical therapy is get you out of pain before they ever start doing any strength training. So if you find, you're out gardening, you're out doing whatever, and your back's a little sore, ice it. Ice it that night. Don't wait, ice it. If we can keep those nerves from becoming inflamed, we can really prevent a lot of the problems there. So big things with your lower back. We want you mobile, but we want you strong. Strength is going to be the most important part of it. Your mid-thoracic should be mobile, but you need to make sure you're strengthening. And extension is the most important part. So your bridges, then isometric stabilization, that's your planks, then rotation. The last one is flexion, which is totally backwards of everything you're going to see in the gym. Questions? So Dave mentioned sciatic pain. A lot of times when we have sciatic pain, it's usually a muscle imbalance side to side. So one of the big things, if you sit a lot, your hip flexors, so remember how we talked hip flexors are a part of core. If your hip flexors are too tight, it will actually pull you into what we call a slight anterior pelvic tilt. Your hips will be a little forward. If your hips are a little forward, you actually have to hyperextend your lower back to really stand up straight. It causes a pinching on those nerves that go out of your spine, across the top of your butt, and then down your legs. That's sciatic pain. Usually what we find is one side will be a little bit tighter than the other. And then on the back muscles, one side will be weaker than the other. That muscle imbalance, the tight in front, weak in the back on the extension muscles, that's what causes that slight pinch on one side, not the other. When we balance that out, focus on the extension, strengthen those muscles, stretch out the hip flexors, we find a lot of that discomfort goes away. But icing it will also work. Obviously, it's going to be on the one side that's the most painful because it's still irritating nerves. That's what causes the pain, is the irritation of the nerves. Questions? No, I covered everything. So from that first program that I sent out on bridges and planks, how many people have been doing them consistently? I only see one hand up. Okay.
So you're saying now to go ahead and do 2 to 3 more times the bridge and the Superman and the quadruped than the others?
So if you noticed initially, I had bridges and Supermans and then planks. So I had it 2 to 1 extensions to anything else. Yeah. That's the way I designed the program. And that is to work on those areas to really get you stronger. Once you increase things, yeah, add more extension in before you start adding anything else in. So either add weight to them, go to a more advanced exercise, but ramp those up before you add rotation or before you even try flexion.
And when you're doing the bridge, you're exhaling as you rise, or?
So on those, honestly, it really doesn't matter nearly as much as you think.
Oh, okay.
So
effort into that.
No, there are some very specific things where breathing is a huge issue with exercise. Most of the time, I want you to exhale when you're exerting yourself the most. So in this case, on the bridge, yes, it would be while you're coming up, inhale on the way back down because you're not exerting yourself as much. If we talk about big exercises, squats, deadlifts, things like that, we actually want you holding your breath. And this, I know this is where it gets a little funky because depending upon what you do determines how we have you do it. So most of the exercises, honestly, we just don't want you to hold your breath. That's the big thing. If you mix up the timing of breathing in or breathing out, is it really going to affect the exercise? No, it's not. Is it going to change what you get out of the exercise? No, it is not. On your big, heavy lifts, yes, it will. So when I mean big, heavy lifts, that is when you're dragging the big barbell out with the big plate weights and everything on it. We need to talk, because your risk for an injury really goes up if your breathing is wrong there. Most of the other exercises, no, it's not going to affect things one way or the other. Focus more on your form and technique of the exercise and breathe. Doesn't matter whether you're breathing in or out, just keep breathing.
Who do we talk to go ahead and get more time taken off of the plank after you're 65?
Sadly, I would probably think they're going to add more time to it, just because they're really realizing how important your core is and how much people are not doing it. So if you focus on the extensions and the isometric, like the plank variations, you've covered most of it, to be quite honest. I torture a lot of the troops. I have a class called Plank You Very Much that I run with a lot of the troops. Planks get very boring. So mine is 39 variations of planks. Some are really easy. Some you have to really commit to, otherwise you will fall on your face.
I believe it.
I get bored easy.
Oh. Excellent presentation, Dale.
Yeah, very good, very good.
So any questions? Anything specific about how to progress your core workouts?
No.
I would imagine the other parts of the package that you've given us come in the next session where you're talking about the legs.
Yes. So the next one, we're going to talk more about legs specifically. We're going to go through. So, the old song, knee bones connected to the thigh bone. Everything overlaps. So any leg work you do, you're also going to get a lot of hip and glute. You're also going to get a lot of lower back. Now, one of my previous physical therapists, keep in mind, I've been working in this capacity for about 11 years. I've gone through 8 physical therapists in my time. They're very different as far as their approach. One of my favorite physical therapists, if you came in with a back injury, you had to deadlift 75% of your body weight before you left physical therapy. None of those people ever returned with back problems or pain. It was a big exercise that works your hamstrings, your hips and glutes, and your lower back. Teaching them how to do it right, yeah, it kept everything strong enough where we did not have people come back with problems. So a lot of the things I've presented here, one of our other units, we did a trial program. I actually reduced their back injury rate 52% in 6 months, focusing on extension, isometric, and rotation. They did no sit-ups, no crunches, no nothing. Just extension, isometric, and rotation. That's it. That's all I had them do. I was able to clear out over half their back injuries in 6 months. So the programs do work. It's just really making sure you're consistent with them. They're not sexy exercises. They're not really cool. They're not the things you're going to see a lot of the fitness models doing. But they work, and they really work on keeping you strong, keeping you injury-free and out of pain. And that's the big issue with a lot of this. So keeping your back strong and healthy is very important. Okay, last call for questions.
Good.
No? Okay. So next month, we're going to be going over leg exercises. We're going to be talking about really working on stabilizing the hips, working on your legs. A lot of people don't focus on their hamstrings enough. And we're going to get into that, why that's important. Your hamstrings actually support the back of your knees. So if you're not working your hamstrings, you're missing part of the support and strength in your knees. Don't worry, we're going to go over the front and the face of the knee too, but we're going to focus on legs next week, go over how to strengthen those and how to work on some of the exercises we've already given you and adjust those and progress those up.
Dale, just
Yes.
real quick, at the beginning, I think you said something about if you've had a back injury, you will be prone to back injuries. Is that why these exercises are so crucial?
Yes. So the big thing is number one predictor of an injury is a prior injury.
A prior.
And if
Okay.
you've had a back injury before,
Right.
your risk for a back injury is a lot higher
Okay.
because
Okay.
you already have a weak spot, usually on those intervertebral discs never fully heal. They're not like muscles. They have no blood flow to them. They do not fully heal once you've injured them. You will always have a weak spot on them.
Oh, all right.
But if you get everything stronger around it that supports that area,
Okay.
it's not as big of a deal.
Got
The
it.
big thing to remember there, though, is mechanism of injury. How did you get hurt the first time? So let me give you a for instance. If you tripped and fell
Oh,
and the injury was on your left side, so that's where the pain was. If you bend forward and you twist, that left side is where you're most prone to injury. That means from now on, instead of bending and twisting, you may need to either kneel down, you may need to squat down instead of bending and twisting, or turn your body so you just bend, you don't twist.
okay.
All those things will reduce your risk for an injury, but ideally I want you stronger also.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, well, please tune in next month. We're going to be talking about your legs.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Dale.
Thanks, Dale.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dale. Good job.
Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent. Thanks, Dale.